Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are in the world. I am Dirk Coetzee from the OKR Institute, and it's my pleasure to introduce Anita Bodnar to you, our speaker for this evening or for this day. Some of you might have already learned from her during the foundation course of the OKR Institute and also other practitioners courses. She's the former head of the very famous, or head of HR of the very famous company Mind Valley previously. She's also the head of OKR implementation for Sodexo. And this evening, she will be speaking about embedding OKRs into your organization's DNA. It will be about a 30-minute presentation, and there will also be ample time for questions, around 10 minutes towards the end. I hope you enjoy it, and over to Anita.
Thank you so much, Dirk. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in today's session. I'm super excited to see some of your faces. Hello. Are you guys in a job and collecting some inspiration for OKRs? Hello, hello. So, regardless of where you are in your OKR journey, you haven't gotten started yet, or maybe you're in the midst of it and you're feeling a little bit stuck. So regardless of that, you're in the right place because we're going to be talking about something that is a little bit different than I think usually what we talk about, which is how to create a strong set of OKRs. We're going to talk about something different, which comes with the maintenance of the OKR system, which is really how to embed a good OKR system into our organization's DNA. And that's something that really changes from company to company. There are some set of things, principles and tools that we all can use, but there are certain things that we can ask ourselves based on what kind of organization we're implementing OKRs to and what kind of organizations we are working in. So thank you for joining and let's get started, okay? Let's see how I can go into. Okay, so I got a little bit of an introduction. Thank you so much, Dirk. Really just adding on it, what I do mainly and what I love doing is creating OKR implementations from 0 to 100% in organizations for my clients. I also have a really dear and very nice partnership with OKR Institute for a very long time. And I've been really fortunate to be asked to teach the OKR Foundation and OKR practitioner courses. I both give certification courses in English and now in Spanish. I'm based in Barcelona, so I'm really trying to up my level of Spanish. So I decided to do this challenge to do these certifications in Spanish. And really, whether you are a leader, team member, an OKR implementation expert yourself, I hope that this webinar is going to bring you some inspiration on what kind of tools you can use to really make sure that the OKRs are going to fit into your organization and you're going to be able to maintain them. So we're going to start with some reality check and some of the things why OKRs might be failing, some of the things that you might have heard about and some things that might be maybe even new. So I think the biggest one is the lack of the leadership buy-in, and really furthermore, the leadership buy-in. I came across this insight in the last couple of years since I've been doing the implementations, is that if the CEO, if the number one person in the organization is not on board, or it's not even not on board, but is not leading the OKR implementation with the expert or the team member who is in charge of the OKR implementation, it is really difficult to get a successful implementation. Because I experienced this, that when a CEO is really leading an OKR implementation, it's a different, it comes with things like, for example, a CEO goes into a meeting and the first question that she or he asks is that, okay, great, but what are your OKRs? And it's very different than when we implement OKRs and we just use it as a as a tool that we use as an add-on to everything else that we have already been using, because we might not really be taking advantage of what the tool is good for, which is to really sometimes start all conversations with, cool, but what are your OKRs? Because OKRs are what the impact is, what the outcome of the work is, and everything else should derive from that, right? So that's one of the biggest issues. The other issue is if we are using OKRs as a replacement of a broken KPI system, or if we just try to implement OKRs and not have any KPI system in place, because OKRs is not here to replace the KPI system. The two have very different strengths and very different objectives in a company, and the two should actually dance together synchronously and help the organization in two different ways. And so when we use OKRs to kind of create a rigid top-down performance system, it often fails because a KPI system is used to really track performance and look at performance in an objective way, and OKRs is really to engage people in contributing to the organization in their own way with their own goals. The other thing is the set and forget syndrome. I think that this is something that we can support by having a good process in place. So really it happens when we have a great way of setting OKRs, but we often forget that OKRs is not just it's not a metric system. It's not like SMART methodology or the KPIs. It's not just a metric, it is a framework. So a framework means that it has to come with a set of rituals and a set of process adjustments in a company in order for it to really work. And a misalignment across teams, I think it's another one of those lack of process, or something that a good process with a good playbook can really solve, because misalignment really stems from not really using the methodology in a way that we intend to. So we have to, first of all, make sure that the leadership team and the company itself is on the same page in terms of what kind of alignment type we are using for our company. And there are many. So here, of course, is to make sure that we have certain decisions in place in order for us to make sure that we know what type of alignment we're using, as well as having one person, either an OKR champion or somebody who oversees the OKR implementation, who is in charge of and is responsible mainly to address misalignment issues. No accountability or tracking I think is another one of those lack of a process that is something that if we have good progress monitoring, good rituals, making sure that whenever we set OKRs, we always have an owner and a co-owner of those OKRs, because if everybody is responsible, no one is really responsible. So talking about all this, there are of course many other things that might cause an OKR to fail, an OKR implementation to fail. But I think that one of the solutions that can help is really to making sure that when we implement an OKR system is to have 4 main sets of principles in place in order for us to match this OKR implementation with our company's DNA. I think the first and foremost is that in any case, an OKR implementation really needs to contribute to our already existing processes and tools that we have in place. So for example, the most important that an OKR has to interact with within an organization is the strategy and our KPIs, regardless whether we have, I think in most of the cases, in any companies, even if it's a scale up or a bigger company, normally we have strategy plannings or strategy meetings in place and some kind of strategy, a list of strategy or some kind of documentation on that. But KPIs is really not the same. Most of the time I see 50% of the companies that I work with do have KPI systems in place, but 90% of those, they're not really happy with it. So it's not really working. But in any case, it is really OKRs, it is really to be implemented to help both and to gather information from both. And take advantage of the things that strategy and KPIs don't really solve in an organization, which is OKRs. It is really to execute and prioritize and look at the main outcome in the organization. The second principle, it is that OKRs is not, it's really a cultural thing. It is not just an operational tool, which really means is that I've experimented with this a little bit, that before I start an OKR implementation, I like to do or make a set of decisions with the leadership that I'm working with in order for me to assess the company's intention of wanting to implement OKRs. And it really opens my eyes to the fact that, or why organizations really want this system. And these three set of principles that I always talk about with them before the implementation helps me to really create an implementation that will match their cultural, their organization's culture, as well as matches the intention that the company has to have OKRs. The third principle is OKRs need to be reinforced through rituals and champions. So I think that this is the most known for when it comes to an OKR implementation, that we have to have some rituals, and also some champions who help us really make it as part of the organizational mindset. And I will talk about some of my most favorite rituals that for me, they were really helpful during all of my implementations. And then last but not least, I think having a really supportive tool, technology, and a playbook is also helping us to minimize the manual work that needs to go into maintaining OKRs, because let's be honest, a set of OKR comes with objectives and key results, and it is word heavy. It is quite difficult to see the alignment, especially if you have 300 or 500 people. Having OKRs, so technology really helps you for us to see everything through and understand, okay, who connects where, who is doing what are the progresses. And a playbook helps us to really have a set of our processes to everybody to be on the same page. So the first and foremost, why OKRs must be anchored in KPI and strategy. So I think for this really to work in the beginning, let's say that where we implement OKRs or where we are already implementing OKRs, we have a strategy and some sort of KPIs in place. Now, KPIs is very good in telling us what is the business usual. Is the business usual working for us? It is looking at the past. It is mainly about, well, 100% of the time is about lag indicators. It really helps us to understand whether we have a problem in our business as usual. But what they don't tell us, the KPIs, is that, okay, cool, but how are we gonna fix it, right? The strategy, on the other hand, is very good at looking into the future and really showing us, okay, what do we want to do? We have a collection of ideas, some projects, so here's some numbers, some things we want to do. Is a big mix of our future aspirations. In some cases, very explicit. In some cases, it's a little bit like up in the clouds. But what strategy doesn't really do well for us is it doesn't translate what we need to do next. It doesn't translate into execution, and OKRs help to bridge this gap between strategy and execution. So if I needed to draw it on a board and how it will look like, when we set OKRs, our first set of OKRs, we have to first look at a strategy and really derive from what are our lead indicators that we want to look into in the future based on the strategy that we have. Now, depending on the organization, depending on the size of the organization, we can look at 2-3 years ahead. But what OKRs does is that, okay, cool, but where do we need to prioritize our efforts in the next 1 year or the next quarter? And what are the really, how will success look like? How do we understand success, right? So really talking about those outcomes and impacts that will help us see whether we're driving towards that strategy. And then also when we're setting OKRs, on the other hand, we can review our KPIs and see, okay, cool, based on the data, what are the things that are really off track or have been really trending off in the last couple of months or quarters. So those will need to be really embedded in the OKRs, but really not in a way that, okay, NPS has been going down, let's set an OKR to increase NPS, because that doesn't really solve the problem, right? It just puts it in the OKRs, and then the teams will align to it. But what it really means when we derive from the KPIs and try to solve a problem around the KPIs is that before we define something in our OKRs, we think about, okay, or we look into the data and see what aspects of the what aspects are causing in our business for the NPS to fall. So it may be a customer problem resolution time that has been really going up since the NPS has been going down at the same time. So maybe we will need to set an OKR regarding bringing down the customer problem resolution time or response time. Right, so it is really identifying the problem and putting that as part of the OKRs for the entire organization to align towards, or whoever has the resources and capacity to do so, and to solve together the existing problem. The second principle was that we spoke about, that OKRs is cultural and not just operational. And here I started talking about those main things that I normally like to discuss before implementing OKRs into the organization to understand the culture. And even if you're in the midst of an implementation, you're like, oh, I haven't done that. It's okay. It's always a good time to take a step back and review, why are we doing what we're doing? So I've done this before. I've done implementations, just let's start, cool, company OKRs, team OKRs. And I realized slowly that I've had so many problems not addressing these things. So it's really something that doesn't come from a big book. It comes from my experience. And I would love for you to learn from my mistakes. So the first one is discussing about the OKR timeline. It's a small thing. I mean, it can be a 5-minute conversation, but it helps us in the future. So the timeline really means what the timeline really means is the duration of the OKR cycle. So normally, I like to say that company OKRs are to be created for 1 year, and the alignments of the team OKRs are normally between a quarter or half a year, so bi-yearly. So we'll talk about when to do what. The OKR alignment is a little bit more complex question, because, for example, if I go into an implementation just deriving from my own judgment on, to me, what a good alignment is, or what type of alignment is a good for me, then I'm missing the point on, there's so many other ways to align. So what I mean by this is that, for example, if you have read John Dower's book, Measure What Matters, which is the Bible of the OKRs, I'm sure many of you have already read it. So according to that book, the alignment type that John Dower is using there is an explicit type. And it is very different from what I'm using, for example, in many of the cases. So even John Dower acknowledges that there are many types, because as OKRs are being implemented so many times to so many companies and so many industries, it also changes and evolves in what kind of ways we can align the OKRs, because it is a very overlooked or under talked about topic, like how do you align? And I think it's really important to address in the beginning. And the type of OKRs is really also comes down to, okay, what kind of, like, who are we, and not even who are we, but like, what is the intention with the OKRs? What do we want to do? Because depending on that, we can have committed, aspirational, or learning type of OKRs, and I will get into each one of those. But first, OKR time. So what I've seen is that when I advise that the company OKRs to be created for 1 year, and the alignments of the teams or the individuals is to be bi-yearly, is when a company already really masters the use of the KPIs. And OKRs are used as a new tool to generate ideas, inspiration, and innovation, but it's not really a performance tool. So in that particular case, I usually advise for the companies to have this the OKR cycle to be repeated once or twice a year. Meanwhile, if we're doing quarterly, which is the vast majority of the implementations that I've done, depends on the volatility of the company. So if the company is operating in a more changing, flexible environment, tends to change strategy frequently, that OKRs have to respond to. As well as, it's an interesting thing that I also learned the hard way, that the time component. So when we start an implementation, it is very important to think about and to be very explicit with how many hours is it going to take for the leadership team or whoever is in charge of the managers who are planning the OKRs, or the CEO, or all the directors of the departments. I mean, depending on all the hierarchies in our organizations. But I'm normally very explicit about, okay, cool, we want to go with the quarterly because we love OKRs, we want to embrace them. But in terms of hours, this is what's going to take from us. And it's obviously going to serve us at some point, but it takes time. So we're not going to see a change, or we're going to see change, but we're not going to see the results that we think we can see in the first and the second quarter. We're going to see them later, but we have to keep up with the commitment. And the most successful implementations that I've had was, that's why the CEO, not to be on board, but to lead an implementation like this, maybe not doing the operational parts, obviously, but to lead by example, to come on stage and be like, my OKRs are XYZ, what are your OKRs, right? So that's why it's so important, because if the CEO prioritizes time, everybody is going to be prioritizing time. And if the CEO is prioritizing time, then the leadership team will have to, at some point, move into a buy-in, not necessarily obviously by being forced, but little by little, it is going to become a very big part of the company's DNA. The OKR alignment. So this was the second part of what I think we should address before we do an OKR implementation. So there are many types. So far, what I know, there are two types, or at least there are two types that I've been using in my implementations. The explicit type of alignment is what, for example, John Dower talks about in his book. So this is the type of alignment that, for example, the company creates an objective and the key results. And in this alignment, the key result of the company is copy-pasted into the objective of the team that adopts it. And then they create the key results based on that objective. And then the next person in the hierarchy takes the key result and turns it into the objective. So it is a very close loop OKR alignment. And we use it when, for example, a company wants to navigate some sort of a crisis. So in a short-term basis, right? It's something that is happening in the market, where we're changing a business model. We need to make sure that the key results that we identify on a company level has a tight connection to a team OKR. It is also we've also done this kind of implementation where, for example, a company that is relatively young, so meaning the company is young, the workforce is really young, and they're scaling up incredibly fast with no performance management practice. So in that particular case, the management thought that explicit is more suitable for them, because of the relatively young workforce, they wanted to make sure that nothing really gets lost in the translation, and the liberty that the teams get to create their own OKRs is something that they wanted to do later, and not in the first couple of rounds. So in that case, this is another viable solution to use explicit. Directional is a bit a softer way of alignment. So what that means is that it has two types. It can be direct or indirect. So that means is that a company has a key result related to sales or sales numbers or something regarding growing sales or clients. So here there are some owners on a team level where they can make a direct contribution. For example, the sales team or even the marketing team in cases where marketing is directly in charge of revenue or getting clients via digital marketing. So it can they both can align in their own way, and we have to make sure that they own both the outcome of the work that they want to do that matches their resources, their abilities, their capacity, right? And then, but they work alongside each other to support that main company key result. And indirect is when, for example, we have a sales related OKR, and we want the customer support team to align. So obviously the customer support team doesn't have a direct influence on the sales or the generating new leads or revenue. It has retention, obviously it contributes to retention, but it is going to be an indirect alignment because it doesn't necessarily own the success metrics, aka the outcomes of the key results of the company level key results. So it will have to look at the objective and then create their OKRs indirectly. So in cases when we use directional, either direct or indirect type of alignment, it is best used in cases where we really want to use OKRs to generate creativity. It was the main way of doing OKRs, if I may say that. So when Andy Grove created this OKR methodology for Intel, the whole idea that he had was, why do I hire so many smart people and then I have to tell them what to do, right? So his idea was that I'm just giving the objectives, and then the people that I hire, they will tell me the direction that we need to go into. So it is a similar way of doing alignment. So we give the direction, but we encourage alignment by their own terms. And of course, it's in this case, it's a really empowering and engaging tool. We can do both the top-down and bottom-up alignment, because obviously we will need to define some sort of company level key results that we really need to work on, because it's coming from strategy and it's coming from the KPIs. But less is always more, so that because the least amount of OKRs we define on a company level, the more we can encourage a bottom-up way of alignment, which we really want to do. So it is really an art to create OKRs. It is not a science. It takes practice, because you have to think, okay, cool. So I want the teams to really get encouraged to align. So we have to think about the key results that we create. So for example, we love creating things like, regardless of the industry that you're in, really, save 500 hours for your stakeholder. It's something a stakeholder can be an employee, it can be a consumer, a client, a investor, right? So or a colleague. So it's something that everybody can really align. So there are some really flagship key results that are really working and igniting this kind of creativity in the teams. The types of OKR. So here we can talk about committed aspirational learning. I'm just looking at the time and I'm realizing that I have totally overgone, so I'm going to pick it up a little bit. So committed aspirational learning, there are 3 types, really depending on what we want OKRs to use for. Aspirational is the most known. This is where we set really bold goals. The committed is really like we need to have 100% of the goal completed. And learning is when we really, for example, we get into a new market, we really don't have any lag indicators, we don't know what historical data we can use, and we mainly set our OKRs in the future, and something that it's like proving a hypothesis instead of aiming for an outcome. In terms of the OKR rituals, there are 4 main rituals that I love implementing, and it's very important. The most important is the biweekly or maximum monthly check-in. So this is where using a tool, a software, we look at how far we came, what is the status of our OKRs, what is the quantitative progress that we made. The second is the quarterly OKR meetings. This is probably what I've seen working the best, like the best of the best of the best. This is really working. So it's a client of mine. We started doing this every quarter. the company, like the people who have OKRs, we go into a place outside of the office, usually some really nice place. And then everybody who has OKRs, every team who has OKRs, they come and present. And then we talk about the company OKRs, and then we look at the alignments on how these teams contributed to the company OKRs. We celebrate, we connect, we talk, we do workshops on, okay, we zoom in on different company key results and look at the initiatives around that. So it became one of the best tools to really encourage OKRs and progress within the teams. Quarterly OKR retrospectives, it is really, if we're on a quarterly OKR cycle timeline, to really help making sure that, okay, we're still in line with the strategy, and any KPIs that needs addressing that are off track, we include them into our OKRs. And the yearly OKR planning is that every year the company OKRs have to, again, be reshifted and revisited to make sure that we are still following the same our strategy. The OKR champions are really a gift to an OKR implementation. They are advocates of the tool. Normally they're people who want to be part of this implementation. Or it can be, it's either a group of totally random individuals who want to learn about OKRs, or they're selected team by team. So it depends on how big of the organization is. They're also facilitators, so they help to do the check-ins to make sure that everybody's on the same page for when it comes to following the OKR rituals. They're troubleshooters, so help with different kind of questions, knowledge hubs. So they're people who need to really know the OKR playbook, and culture catalyst, of course, to constantly encourage not just OKRs, but the mindset that comes with it. So, for example, failure is welcome, and thinking bold is more important than getting it right or getting it 100%. The other important element of, oops, what did I do? The other important element to the OKR champions is it is very important that there's one person who leads the OKR champions, because if everybody is in charge of everything, it is very hard for everything to be overseen. So I'm not making sense, but what I mean is that when there's one person in charge of the champions, that one person can address any, changes in the alignment that, for example, a company needs to do. That person is a bit more strategic. That person oversees the entire thing basically and helps the champions to be in the place where they need to be. So I think it's another thing that I haven't always seen in implementations, where there's a one main person who leads the whole thing. The playbook is a very, very good tool to make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel. And there are a couple of elements of the playbook that we might want to have. For example, how to set impactful OKR. So really just using some examples from the company that we're doing the playbook for. What are some of the company OKRs that are really good, and what are some that we, for example, it wasn't really good? So just to show an example of what we mean by when we say it's a good set of OKRs. OKR alignment guidelines. So how do we do OKRs, do alignment in this company? What are our processes and rituals? What are the timelines? When do we have to do what? Then there's the selected OKR champions. Who are they? What are their contacts? In what regards can we contact them if we have issues? And of course, information about the tool, the software. I think that another thing is having smaller rituals that help with the cultural shift as well. So we have the bigger rituals, which are the retrospectives, the quarterly presentations. Smaller rituals, I mean by having, for example, communication emails embedded that go out every month, or like a weekly digest, and really having OKRs, I think is very good to have a context. So for example, I used to do communication where I would talk to a team that I saw that they made a really big progress in their OKRs, and ask them, like, what happened? Like, what did you guys do differently? What did you learn? What was it something that what was it exactly that made you succeed? And I would just type it out and put it in that email to inspire people, and to help to encourage them. Another thing is checking notifications. Normally, if we have a software, we can embed it and to have some notifications on, either as an encouragement or reminders on the process. And of course, celebrating wins. So I think celebration of a few things, so not necessarily a quantitative progress, but also celebrating the behavioral aspect of the OKR. So people who, for example, if you have a software, then we can see who checks in regularly or on time. So we can also celebrate that kind of behavior. So just to recap, because I also want to make sure that we have some time for the questions. So OKRs is a mindset. It's not just a framework. That's why it is important that when we implement it, we ask questions that really cater for what is the real intention with OKRs. Why do we do it? What do we mean by good set of OKRs? What is a good definition of an outcome? Aligning OKRs to KPI and strategy, regardless whether we have KPIs or it's working or not, but to really take advantage of whether it's KPI or just data at our fingerprints, to look at the data and see, okay, where do we have off track and what are the things that we have to solve for, and not just putting it as it is into our OKRs, but really looking at the data and seeing, okay, what are the aspects contributing to a drop of a revenue or a drop of an NPS, and addressing that as part of our OKRs. Establishing rituals and rhythms within the company. I think those 4 that I spoke about are really the most important, but there are some mini rituals like the communication email or notifications that we can also embed. Empowering OKR champions, making sure that there is one person who is in charge of all the OKR champions and in charge of everything, that if something breaks, that person we can go to. And of course, leverage playbooks, making sure that we have a playbook, because we really don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time, and having some sort of a tool that really helps us to minimize manual tasks and maximize our performance. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I think we're gonna have some questions, but if you don't get the time to ask me, then you can find me on LinkedIn, or we can have a certification session on OKR Institute. I also teach free OKR Foundation classes in English and Spanish. So I think I will stop now, and I will ask Dirk to come to help me, please, to address the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Anita, for this insightful webinar and presentation. Thank you very much. I think there are a couple of questions I've seen in the chat. For example, Wayne. Wayne, do you want to raise your question? Wayne, where are you? Okay. Yeah.
I'm here if you want me to ask the question directly.
Yeah, please.
So,
Hi, Wayne. Go ahead.
Hi, Anita. Yeah. You had an interesting point there about devoting some time to spend on OKR development in the company, and you said about 5 to 10 hours per quarter, if I got that right. So I was just wondering, how did you arrive at that? Is that from experience, and also what happens if you don't spend that much time, or you find a company spending way more than that time?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it is more like a being aware that it is going to cost us time around this time. It's not about, okay, if it's not 6 hours and it's 12 hours that I failed. It is really about, let's be clear that this is going to cost us time, because I think one of the biggest problems or why leadership is sometimes a bit defensive with OKRs is because, hey, like, I have all this stuff to do. I have already a lot of things, and you're adding this on it. So you really have to address the why we're doing it. And then also it is going to cost us time, but it is going to benefit us at some point. So the 5 to 10 hours definitely comes from experience. I think it was for a company of 300 people with a leadership team of 20. And it was the first quarter. So it's the first quarter. 5 to 10 hours, I mean the entire OKR cycle, right? So OKR cycle to me consists of 4 things. So the OKR planning, the OKR evaluation, the refinement, and the execution. So but it's everything. It's all the rituals that you do. It's all the planning that you help your team with. It's all that, okay, the team has created the OKRs and then you sit down with them and then you refine them. It costs us time, and 5 to 10 hours is like the minimum that we're going to spend in the beginning. Second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, it is going to get easier and easier.
Mhm.
I hope I
Thanks,
answered to
Wayne.
your question, Wayne.
Excellent.
Good?
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
Thanks,
You're
Wayne.
welcome.
Chris also had a question. How should OKRs be set when the resources are flat and growth is not the focus?
Sorry, the OKRs how to be set if the resources are
How should
flat
OKRs
and
be set when resources are flat and growth is not the focus?
well, I
Then
think asking ourselves the question, do we really need OKRs? I mean,
I think so. If
I
the
think
resources
that,
are limited, I think, yeah. Is that something we did? Maybe Chris, yeah. Do you want to raise the question here directly?
Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Chris. Yes, perfectly.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring up this question, right? Financial, status can, impact the OKRs, right? So if the organization, the company is not growing or they're not investing in a lot of things, then there's kind of a domino effect, right? The OKRs that you're envisioning may not be funded, right? So you don't have the headcount to develop, XYZ to improve your technology. So yeah, I just want to ask that question because that's a challenge today, as you can see in the economy, and sometimes companies we're not growing next year, we're not increasing headcount. So what do you do in that aspect when you don't have the resources available to put in place OKRs that are going to provide?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that first and foremost, I'm not a person who says every company needs OKRs, and I'm quite firm in that. I think the first thing is to ask ourselves, why do we want to use OKRs? So again, if it's about a replacement of a performance management tool that is not working, it is not going to work with OKRs either. But if it's something that we want to implement it to empower creativity and to change our mindset from output-based to outcome-based thinking, it is definitely worth it. I think that I had a million of those, conversations with companies where the resources were tight and they wouldn't, for example, be able to afford me. But I always advise them that start small. Start with somebody who is eager to do OKRs. Maybe they read the book. I mean, I started this way. For Mind Valley, I created OKRs from scratch. I had zero idea what I was doing. And I failed a million times, and it took me 3 years, and it still wasn't perfect, but I tried, And we didn't have resources, and we didn't have the technology in the beginning. We used spreadsheets. There was a company recently where I implemented OKRs. They didn't want to spend money on a new software. They wanted to use Notion because they use Notion. They paid for Notion. So we literally implemented OKRs on Notion. It is not the best tool because it is not automated. It is quite manual, but it is something. It helps. So I think that we can always start small, but again, the most important is why do we do it? Why do we need it? And then so if that why is answered to, it's much easier to get that buy-in from all the levels of the organization. Chris, did I answer to your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, also Manish had a question. Manish, do you want to raise your question here?
Can I do a question?
Sure. Hi.
Yeah, please.
Are you listening to me? Okay.
Yes, Annie, we hear you.
Thanks for your knowledge sharing. It's perfect. I would like to know if an OKR system is an advanced model for evaluating an employee performance, individual performance. Is it appropriate or not in this case? For evaluation,
Yeah.
no,
I'm not sure
I'm
any if I
still-
understood. Sorry, it's breaking. I don't mean to interrupt you. The line is breaking.
Can I repeat the question? Yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah, please.
I'm interested that can OKR system be work very well for evaluating performance in every employee stage for individual levels in the organization, or
Yeah,
it is
Annie,
a teamwork framework. I want to know that.
Yeah. Annie, I heard you. And thank you for the question. It's another great question. I think that yes, definitely OKRs can be part of an individual evaluation, but it cannot be only. So OKRs should not only be the it should be like an input to the performance, because it is very hard to use OKRs as an objective performance evaluation, because especially if we use them with that mentality of aspirational goals, because we ask people to set bold goals, and if you set bold goals, I mean, chances are you can only hit 75 or 80% of them. So when it comes to the evaluation of that performance, context really matters. So if we hit 100% of that key result, was it because we set the bar too low, or was it because we actually did what we had to do? So or if we hit 50% of the key result, was it because we set the bar really high and it was a really, really, really hard key result, but we did so well? So context is very, very important. And I think also KPIs and peer evaluation. So it's a mix of things. OKRs is just a part of it, and everything else, there should be other objective forms of evaluation.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Annie.
questions? Yeah, thanks, Annie. Any other questions? We're almost at the end. Yeah, so if there are any other questions, please let us know. Otherwise, thank you, Anita, for this fantastic presentation, and thank you everyone for joining. We will have another session webinar next month. We will be announcing that soon. And I wish you good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, yeah, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you,
Anita.
everyone. Bye. Have a beautiful
Bye.
day. Thanks, Dirk.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Bye.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.